Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, still slightly under the weather, but finally doing the voiceover for this video. This is of course the good, the bad, and the weird for the Tau, and we're starting off with this Tarian Elder Mech, which is effectively a Crisis Suit Commander. Now, the color scheme I'm going for is kind of classic sci-fi, dark and light, so we're going to start by painting all of the orbs and grills and energy bits in a white-blue from Pro Acryl, or blue-white, I can never remember which it is. This is a very useful paint that goes on pretty well over everything, and it gives you a slightly blue-tinged white. The color balancing is a little messed up here, I will admit. I'm trying to get better about that, though. This model went together pretty easily and came with a bunch of options. As you can see, I built this with a completely nonsensical loadout. No need to comment that this is not a legal loadout. I do not play Tau. I do not plan to play Tau. This is purely a painting project. So I gave it 2 swords because they look cool, and then a cyclic ion and a melta. Aside from all that, this model goes for something that feels a little bit more traditional sci-fi than the more Gundam mecha-inspired sci-fi that the regular Tau battlesuits go for. I used a white ink to paint in the jet engines, or thrusters, whatever you want to call them, on the jetpack. As you can see, I did put this far back because I'm actually going to be gluing the pilot to the base in front of it, because again, it's just a painting project. And then for the armor itself, we're going with black. I used Abaddon Black or Black Legion, really any would work. And just put this over all of the armor, being careful to avoid the white that we put down earlier. This model's pretty nice, honestly. It came with a lot of extra bits, went together pretty easily. Though I will admit, I do prefer the more traditional Crisis aesthetic that you get with the official Tau battlesuits, though I think this one is very valid, and honestly, I still think has some benefits, of course, mainly in all the extra bits it includes, just because of its nature as being 3D printed. This one is from Station Forge, a very popular 3D printer. You can see me here using Pilar Glacier over all of the white bits. This is to give it a sort of a glow, which unintentionally gave it a very Tron aesthetic, which I did not intend to do, but I think it came out pretty nice. The black and blue is just a classic color scheme, of course, that plays quite well with dark colors. Now, this is actually what I originally wanted to do, but I realized while painting that the original paint scheme I had was rather unfitting because of the inspiration it would have taken from, and that is actually from Metal Gear, and that is the Winds of Destruction of Desperado LLC. These guys are, of course, all melee characters. They all fight in melee pretty exclusively, so I figured the Tau would be pretty unfitting, so I went for just a little bit more traditional with the black and blue. Now, once you get this over all of the bits of the armor, excluding things like the thrusters, as we're going to paint those differently, and also, of course, like the vents on the weapons and such like that, we're going to go for painting the chassis, or under bits, if you will. We start with Gravelord Grey, or really like Basilicanum Grey or Black Templar would work as well. And we're going to put this over all of the gray sections of the miniature. This is going to be the practical bits, really. You know, the legs, the midriff, I suppose, the roll cage on the chest, the joints, the barrels of the melta and things like that. All of that's going to get a coat of this, just to bring it down to a darker color. Since the main color we're going for is black, and we really want that to stand out and look dark, we do want something to contrast it aside from the blue, and we're going to be using Lead Belcher for that. But this just gives us a bit of a darker place to work from, and then over all those areas we're just going to dry brush with Lead Belcher, because that will just sort of make a very quick and easy way to do a dark metal. Do excuse my voice if it's a little odd, or if I cough a little bit while recording. I am still very slightly under the weather, though I'm feeling much better than yesterday. Thankfully, it's looking like this sickness is going to take 2 weeks to clear up, which is simply insane. Though I think it is you know, the big one. This also goes on the thrusters and things like that. Basically anywhere that isn't black, blue, or going to be orange later, excluding the shield generators. We're going to paint that up in a different color just to give it a bit of a spot of a splash of color. Now, using the Contrast Magmadroth Flame, which is just a super bright orange, one of my favorite paints, we're going to put this just over all of the thrusters, which is going to be, of course, the 6 sort of horizontal, and then the 4 vertical thrusters, though we did leave the ones in the center of the backpack just blank because they didn't look like they were quite as exposed, so I didn't think it was necessary. And then using Doomfire Magenta, we pick out the shield generator, or whatever you want to call it, mounted on the jetpack. This is just, again, another way to add in a splash of color that I think looks quite nice, as Doomfire Magenta is just a really pleasant color, very similar to something like Screamer Pink, which I'm a very vocal fan of. This did take a couple coats, but that was probably just because I didn't have enough on my brush the first time. But Doomfire and Magmadroth Flame don't have as strong a contrast effect, so doing 2 coats doesn't darken it down all that much. From there, we just have the swords to paint, really, which we paint the blades with that same blue-white. This takes maybe 1-2 coats to get over the entire thing, though make sure you do let it dry all the way. I was rather silly in the next step of this paint scheme, in that I did not let this fully dry when I put the layer of contrast over it, but live and learn. We also do paint the grips of the swords at this point, and I went for just more Screamer Pink or Doomfire Magenta. Either one would work, really, though I prefer Screamer Pink, as it does differentiate it just a tiny bit to give it a more rubberized look, I suppose. But again, if you just want to use less paints, then your Doomfire would work here as well. I then used Azurman Blue to paint the blades, and I, again, didn't quite let the thing fully dry, and I was a bit sloppy on my technique here. Just try and do everything in one swift motion so you're not leaving any strange textures. And with that, we are about ready to move on to our next miniature, which is going to be the Bad, which, of course, at this point, I'm sure you all know what that means. We're on to the next, which is, of course, the Bad, which is really just more of a unscrupulous model, if you will. Just one that has more overtones, if you get what I mean. One that has breasts, so to speak. Anyways, this model is sort of a pilot model. It felt very anime-inspired, which is unsurprising, and also fits with the origin of the Tau being a anime, Gundam, mecha-inspired faction, at least once they finally became the Tau, because they were actually originally going to be lizardmen. Now, as you can see here, I'm starting off with the skin. I'm painting it with that same white blue we used earlier, trying to avoid the areas closest to her clothes, and also any recesses like the big split in her forehead, which is actually an interesting point. I figured while I paint all of this, I could talk about Tau biology, because this is obviously not very accurate. Tau biology is relatively similar to humans in their shape, of course, but where they really diverge is in how they function. In terms of earth animals, what a lot of people call them is, fish people or something along those lines, but they are definitely a lot closer to another family of creature, and that is what would be known as the even-toed ungulates, or that's a more common name for them, which includes things like cows, pigs, hippopotamuses, actually, because they walk on 2 cloven hooves, and the rest of their toes are vestigial or non-existent or not useful, which we see on other Tau models where they do have vestigial toes. They're described as having skin that is very rough and dry and leathery, that exudes almost no moisture. So while their army names are often very fish-like, they are definitely closer to hippopotamus people than they are fish people. And as you can see here with that skin, we're going over that with Azurman Blue, which is a contrast paint mixed with a tiny bit of contrast medium just to make it less dark, and then putting that all over all of the skin areas. This gets a very quick and effective layered skin kind of look that isn't quite as involved as, say, my orc painting method. Going back to Tau biology, the Y split in their forehead is actually interesting because that is something that's only ever been seen on Shadow Sun. Now, that is generally associated with female Tau, but in one of the only other female Tau we've ever seen, which is in this dissection piece right here, she does not have the same marking as Shadow Sun. Now, this is an ethereal, so that could play a part in it, or it could just be that the shape of the crest in their head, if you will, is predominantly the straight line we see on most Tau, and perhaps the split Y design is something like heterochromia, something rather uncommon but definitely seen, where it's just a slight deviation visually. Anyways, that's a lot of talk about Tau biology. Back to the model. Now that we've painted all the skin, we obviously have to move on to the rather ridiculous uniform, if you could even call it that. And I'm going to go with something similar to the paint scheme we used for her mech. As you'll notice, she's actually on a piece of double-sided tape because I'm going to glue her to the base of that mech we just painted. Now, using any black you want, whether that be Abaddon or Black Legion, you're going to want to hit her leotard, which is just, pretty much the only thing on her upper body, excluding her jacket. And just hit this with one coat. Given that we started with gray, this should go on no problem. You also do want to hit her gloves and her thigh highs, I suppose there's no other way to call them, stockings, if you will. Again, this is a ridiculous outfit, but then again, that's the whole point of the series, is to just highlight a bit of a strange spread of models, and this one jumped out to me in the sea of rather samey Tau 3D printed models. Now, she does have some, not necessarily boots on, but definitely some armor on her feet, so I did leave those blank as we are going to paint them following this color scheme. Now, she's wearing this jacket that feels very sci-fi-esque. Obviously, it's a sci-fi setting, but I'm sure you understand what I mean. Very retro sci-fi, and I figured this wouldn't be part of the uniform, but maybe something she wore when she was in training or even before that, so it's going for a more unconventional color scheme, and that's going to be purple. We're using this violet from Vallejo to do the most of it, but there is a two-tone level here, around the shoulders, the collar, and the belts I painted with this heavy purple, also from Vallejo. This took a couple coats, but I think it adds a nice splash of color, and also the belt going across her collarbone, and her, I'm not really sure what to call it, gorget, I suppose? That's not the right word, but she has a collar or something on. Paint that purple as well. Now, once you've done all of that, we're mostly done, but we do have to do the hair, which I did in a sort of reddish color using blood red from the Army Painter in their speed painting line. Mixed with a little bit of water just to make it less intense. I generally associate Tau with red hair, mainly because of Shadow Sun, even though they're pretty much equivalently seen with black hair. So that's why I went with that. In terms of the crest on her back, I'm going with gold, just because I think it's a nice splash of color, and it obviously complements the purple quite well. And this also goes on the little circles on her boots, ankle protectors. Not sure what to call them, because obviously Tau don't wear shoes. I also put this on her headset, just because I think the gold was a nice way to contrast all the dark colors going around. It's just a way to make her stand out, because this feels like sort of an ace pilot figure, or that's at least what comes to mind, so I wanted to go for something flashy. I used a little bit of lead belcher on the backs of her gloves, as there's little rectangles there, maybe they're for interfacing with something. And then I also used this on the belt buckles on her jacket, and on her leotard as well. This is just to add in a little bit of groundedness, if you will. Now, I didn't paint her eyes. You definitely could. I would go for yellow or perhaps an orange, but that is not necessarily important. And then the final step was just adding a purple wash to the entire jacket and her ankle protectors, high tops, I suppose you could call them. And then with that, you're pretty much done with this miniature. This miniature was pretty easy to paint, and I think the design is fun as much as it is ridiculous, as I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. Still, it was pretty fun to paint, as I hadn't painted any Tau before this, and certainly not any Tau skin. But as you can see, I'm just going around being extra careful with that purple wash, as we don't want to get any of that on her skin or her leotard, as it could tinge the black in a slightly odd way. That's to be sure. And one thing I did neglect to mention was that I also painted a small bit of gold on her collar, I suppose. I'm not sure what else to call that. The thing, not her puffed up collar from her jacket, but from whatever you want to call that. I have no idea what that would even be called. Regardless, fun model to paint. On to the next, which is of course the weird And this one is going to be maybe a little bit more out of left field. It's another crossover miniature, though, where the last one was General Grievous, someone I'm very familiar with. This one is Rebecca from Cyberpunk Edgerunners, a show I have not and will not watch, purely out of principle. But I thought the design just kind of stood out as something pretty unique, and I decided to try and stick to her general color scheme, as you can see here. Now, I painted her hair with Gauss Blaster Green, which is a very pale green from Games Workshop, and it took 2 coats to get a nice even coverage, 3 coats in some spots actually. But this isn't quite as green as her hair should be, but we're going to fix that with a wash later. But I think it gets a nice base for the verdigris color that her hair usually is. Now, this character is actually blue-skinned in the show they come from, but we are, of course, going to do that a different way when we get to it. For now, though, we are going to go with the jacket. We're going to use, again, any black that you would want. I was using Black Legion here, and we're just going to color in all of her jacket. Now, there's a good amount of detail here, so if you wanted to use something like Basilicanum Gray or Black Templar, I'd understand, but I just liked the jet black of Black Legion. I'm still under the weather. Please excuse me. It's also 1 a.m. when I'm recording this. I had to get this done because I was tired of it just being edited but not recorded. This model is pretty small, and so this shouldn't take particularly long to do. You can just see me getting around her pulse blaster, pulse carbine, pulse shotgun, whatever it may be. I'm not the most well-versed on Tau infantry weapons. Then you're going to paint her stockings or thigh highs, whatever you want to call them. And as is usual for Tau, these do have a bit of a, open-toed design, so you are going to have to do some wrap around, I suppose, which I just did here in a stirrup sort of fashion, I believe is what those would be called. But this is just the same practice that you did on the jacket. Now, I did paint these in reverse order, funnily enough, so there are some differences between this and how I painted the pilot that we just saw. What you're going to see here is I actually dry brushed her skin with white instead of doing the layering, so it's going to look a little bit different, among another thing we'll get into a bit later. Here you can see me apparently hitting my recording monopod. Then I just used Azurman Blue, undiluted this time, so it is going to be a bit darker, which is actually rather fitting, as the Tau Seps generally do dictate their skin color. The closer they are to the sun, the darker it is. And as this would obviously be a Firecast member, it's not unreasonable that they would perhaps hail from Viorla, which is known for very dark-skinned Tau, and very hot-headed Tau, which I believe fits the character in the show. Again, haven't watched it, not going to, but I think that this fits the character from what I've seen in terms of GIFs and people talking on social media. I think being a breacher, aggressive character would fit quite well. This is just going to go over all of the skin areas, that being, of course, the face, thighs, the feet, and the exposed part of the chest. Overall, though, pretty simple because we're just using contrasts and dry brushing, which is a winning combo 9 out of 10 times. Can you believe how long I've been under the weather? Out of left field, I know, but it has been nearly 16 days by the time I'm recording this that I've been sick. If you can tell in my voice, I'm getting rather frustrated. Anyways, back to the recording. Now, the character in the show has these pink tattoos, I presume, across her body, mainly in the chest, stomach, and a little bit on the thighs, if I'm not mistaken. Here you can just see I picked those out with Squid Pink from the Vallejo. I then used a dark tan on the little sigil lights on her shoulder pads. We're going to paint them yellow later. And then I used Beal Tan Green on her hair to bring it to a very nice shade that I think captures the essence of the character quite well. And this is, of course, just a super easy way to get that color down. And you can see I also painted her headband / headset black, just because I thought that fit quite well. I mixed up a dark metal here by just using a little bit of black and lead belcher to mix into a dark metal, and then I put that on her shoulder pads, which are, of course, pretty unnecessary if you're wearing a hoodie. Then I used this Flash Gets Yellow to paint in the lights, and I also used this on her eyes, though I believe I didn't record that because Past Me is an idiot. I guess I'm paying the price for that for being sick right now. Now, I also used Mantis Warrior Green to paint in the hem of her jacket. This just kind of came to me in the moment. I thought it would add a nice splash of color and tie into her hair and gun quite well, as we're going to paint that later. Now, for her top, not her jacket, I just used a dark color. And really any dark color would work. I believe I used Macragge Blue because it's kind of purpley. It's just a fun color. So that's what I went with for that. Finally, we're going to paint her gun, which we're going to do in 2 tones, as I believe that's how her gun looks in the show, using pink for the lower half, and then for the top barrel, we're going to use a similar color to her hair, but we're going to make it a bit more green. I washed the pink with Carrotbird Crimson, which really brought it to a nice color, and then we're going to use Mantis Warrior Green on the Gauss Blaster Green for the top of the gun to give it that sort of vibrant green aesthetic. And with that, we are done. Now, this video was fun to record, but it's just been a real nightmare being sick this long. I'm quite happy with how the models came out. You can see how puny that Rebecca model is compared to all of the other models here. And as you can see, I can glue her to her base. These models have never seen a tabletop, so I don't think it is a big deal. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you want to see next down below. But the next episode will be on Chaos Space Marines whenever I get around to that. And hopefully I won't be sick anymore. Bye-bye.